Glass hit the marble floor before anyone moved. It didn't shatter completely, just cracked, a clean diagonal split across the screen. But the sound carried. In a room where everyone had spent the evening pretending not to notice each other's net worth, a cracked phone on a lobby floor was the loudest thing that had happened all night. Zara Mensah didn't look down at it. She kept her eyes forward. She had learned that early. You don't look down. Not in rooms like this. Not when the people around you are already deciding what you are. The Caldwell Winter Gala was the kind of event that Toronto's financial press covered, not because anything interesting happened, but because the right people attended. The venue was the Grand Royal on King Street West, a hotel that had existed in some form since 1887, rebuilt twice, renovated 4 times, and currently operating under the management of the Caldwell Group, the family that had, over 3 generations, turned a modest hospitality business into one of the largest private real estate portfolios in Ontario. They owned 17 properties across the country. They had a foundation. They gave to hospitals. They gave to universities. There was a lecture hall at Western that bore the family name and a wing of a children's museum in Ottawa, and every winter they held this gala under the chandelier of their flagship property and invited the city's money to come see what success looked like when it dressed up. What success looked like, according to the Caldwells, was marble floors, 12-piece orchestras, and the very careful management of who came through the door. Zara had come through the door at 7:43 p.m. She was 29 years old. She was wearing a dark green dress she had owned for 2 years, low heels, and a pair of pearl drop earrings her grandmother had sent from Accra when Zara turned 25. She had no date. She had taken the subway. She was carrying a small clutch that did not cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget, which made her unusual in that lobby, though not for the reason the Caldwell staff assumed. The assumption was immediate and visible on the face of the young man at the coat check, who looked at her and then looked past her, as though searching for the person she must be accompanying. "Can I help you find someone?" he said. "I'm a guest," Zara said. He looked at her again. Then he looked at her clutch. Then he said, with the practiced warmth of someone who has been trained to be polite while being dismissive, "Of course. Do you have your invitation?" She handed it to him. He examined it for longer than necessary. He handed it back. "Enjoy your evening," he said, and did not offer to take her coat. She hadn't brought one. It was November, and she had taken a car from the subway station, and she had calculated that she would not need one. This was the kind of calculation Zara made constantly and quietly, the way you learn to when you have spent a decade moving through spaces that were not designed with you in mind. She took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and moved into the room. The Caldwell family was easy to find. They were always easy to find, because rooms like this organized themselves around the people with the most gravity, and the Caldwells had gravity in the specific way that old money does. Not loud, not flashy, but dense. People drifted toward them and then seemed slightly surprised to find themselves there. The patriarch, Harlan Caldwell, was 71 and had the kind of face that made you think of currency, not wealth specifically, but currency, something that had passed through many hands and retained its value through sheer institutional faith. He was speaking to a city councilor near the bar. His son, Brendan Caldwell, was 38. He managed the family's operational portfolio and had the particular confidence of someone who had been told since childhood that his judgment was good. He was standing with his wife, Camille, near the center of the room, and they were laughing at something with a couple Zara didn't recognize, and the laughter was the right kind, inclusive-looking on the surface, sealed at the edges. Zara watched them for a moment. Then she moved toward the edge of the room where the quieter conversations happened, and she found a spot near a column and stood there and looked at the chandelier and thought about what the next hour would require of her. She had been in this building before, though not to this event. She had been in the back offices, twice, for meetings that had not gone the way she expected. She had been in the lobby, once, when she was trying to understand the scale of what she was considering. She had stood in almost this exact spot and looked up at this chandelier and thought, this is a very beautiful thing that someone else built. She was thinking about who would build the next one. It was Camille who approached her first. This was not unusual in Zara's experience. It was often the wives. The men tended to wait until they understood the social geometry. The women moved faster, and sometimes they were warm, and sometimes they were not, and you couldn't always tell which it was going to be until you were already in the middle of it. Camille Caldwell was 41, fair-haired, wearing something ivory that had certainly cost more than the dress Zara had been wearing for 2 years. She had the look of someone who had been beautiful in the way that rooms like this rewarded and had built a version of herself around that fact. She stopped in front of Zara and tilted her head very slightly. "I don't think we've met," she said. "We haven't," Zara said. "Are you with the Bernstein Group?" "No." A pause. "The Mackenzie Foundation?" "No." Camille's smile stayed, but something behind it shifted. The recategorization happening in real time, visible if you knew what to look for. "I'm sorry, how do you know the family?" "I don't," Zara said. "I received an invitation." Another pause, longer this time. "I see." Camille looked at her glass of sparkling water, then at her earrings, then back at her face. "Well, it's a wonderful evening." "It is," Zara said. Camille moved away. Zara finished her water. The program began at 9. Harlan Caldwell took the podium and spoke about the foundation's work, about the hospital wing that would be named in his late wife's memory, about the importance of community and legacy, and the responsibility that came with success. He spoke well. He had clearly done this many times. Brendan spoke briefly after his father, thanking the guests, acknowledging the sponsors. He had his father's diction, but less of the weight behind it, the words arranged correctly, but the feeling slightly off, like a suit that fit but hadn't been broken in. Zara listened from the back of the room. She had a second glass of water. She was not eating the past appetizers because she was watching the room, and watching rooms was easier without a plate in your hand. She was not nervous. People assumed she would be. Later, when they reconstructed the evening, they assumed that someone in her position would have been nervous. She was not. She had been nervous once in the early days when everything felt provisional, when the numbers were real, but the reality of them hadn't settled into her body yet. That feeling had passed. It had passed the day she signed the third agreement, when her lawyer had looked across the table and said, quietly, "You understand what this means?" And she had said yes. And she had meant it. She understood what it meant. She was thinking about this, about the lawyer and the table and that particular afternoon when Brendan Caldwell walked past her on his way back from the bar. He stopped. He looked at her for a moment in the way that people sometimes do when they're trying to place a face and failing. "Did you come with someone?" he said, not unkindly. "Curious, the way you might be curious about something slightly out of place in a room you have organized yourself." "I came alone," Zara said. "Right." He nodded. "And you are?" "Zara Mensah." She said it clearly. She always said it clearly. He nodded again as though filing it somewhere not very important and moved on. It was 40 minutes later when it happened. The program had ended. The room had loosened into the later stage of the evening, the conversations longer, the laughter closer to the surface, the orchestra moving into something quieter. Zara was walking toward the exit because she had done what she had come to do, which was to be present, to be seen, to exist in this space on the night before the papers were signed. She was almost at the door when she heard Camille's voice behind her, speaking to someone in the low-pitched, decisive tone that people use when they believe they are not being heard. No idea who invited her, honestly. It's embarrassing. Someone clearly didn't vet the list properly this year. Zara paused. She did not turn around. "The green dress," Camille continued, "standing by the column earlier. I spoke to her. She doesn't know anyone. She's nobody." There was a murmur from whoever she was speaking to. "Exactly," Camille said. "It's fine, she's leaving." Zara turned around. The two women looked at each other across about 8 feet of marble floor. Camille's expression didn't shift immediately. It took a second, the realization that she had been heard, and then the recalibration, the slight stiffening. "I hope you enjoyed the evening," Zara said. She said it evenly, without heat. Camille said nothing. Zara walked to the door. The coat check attendant was standing nearby, and he stepped forward, not to help her, she understood, but to open the door in that specific way that meant, "Here is the exit. Please use it." And as she reached it, as she was stepping through, Brendan appeared from the side hall. He was moving quickly, purposefully, and he wasn't watching where he was going, and his shoulder caught hers hard enough that she stumbled, her clutch dropping, the small golden clasp breaking on impact with the floor. The contents scattered, her phone, her transit card, a lip balm, a folded card. The card skittered across the marble and landed face up. Brendan looked at it. He looked at it for a moment longer than the situation required. It was a business card, the kind that good printers produce on heavy stock, with a single raised letter, the letterhead of Ashford Capital Partners, and below it, in clean type, Zara Mensah, managing partner. He did not pick it up. He said "sorry" in the reflexive, motorized way of someone who has not actually processed what has just occurred, and continued walking. The door attendant helped Zara collect her things. He handed her the card last, and she thought he held it for just a fraction of a second longer than the others, reading it, and then he handed it to her, and she put it in what remained of her clutch, and she walked out into the November cold. She did not look back at the chandelier. She had already seen it. The announcement came the following morning, at 11 o'clock, in a press release issued by the Grand Royale's communications office and simultaneously by the offices of Ashford Capital Partners. It was not a long announcement. These things rarely are, when the deal itself has already been structured, when the due diligence has been completed over 6 careful months, when the lawyers on both sides have already signed off, and the only thing remaining is the public acknowledgement of a thing that has already become true. The announcement said that Ashford Capital Partners had completed the acquisition of a 38% equity stake in the Caldwell Group, representing the largest single outside investment in the company's 90-year history. The transaction valued the group at a figure that caused one financial reporter to pause mid-sentence in his morning briefing and ask his producer to read it back to him. It said that the Caldwell Group would continue to operate under current management, and that the founding family would retain its remaining equity and board seats, and that Ashford Capital Partners would hold 2 seats on an expanded board, effective immediately. It said that Ashford Capital Partners was headquartered in Toronto, Ontario. It said that the managing partner of Ashford Capital Partners was Zara Mensah. The financial press picked it up within the hour. By early afternoon, the story had moved beyond the financial press. Someone had posted a photo from the gala. It was taken by one of the event photographers, professional and time-stamped, showing Zara standing near the column in her green dress, alone, with her glass of water. The caption was 4 words: "She owns 38%. By evening, the photo had been shared more times than the Caldwell Group's annual report had ever been downloaded in its entire existence. By the following morning, people Zara had never met were finding the photo and writing things in the comment sections of articles about the deal, things about patience and silence, about what it looks like when someone knows something that the room does not, about green dresses and pearl earrings and marble floors, and the specific ancient arrogance of assuming you know what someone is worth by looking at them. Camille Caldwell deleted her social media accounts on the second day. Brendan was photographed arriving at the office with his collar undone, which the entertainment blogs took as a sign of something, though they weren't sure what. Harlan Caldwell gave no statement. The Caldwell Group's share price fluctuated for 48 hours and then stabilized because the deal was good. Zara had ensured it was good, and because whatever the Caldwells had failed to understand about Zara Mensah on a personal level, the market understood her professional one precisely. What the articles did not say, because they did not know, because no one had told them, because Zara did not speak to the press about this, was that she had walked into that gala not because she needed to be there. The papers were already effectively signed. She could have stayed home. She could have gone to dinner with her friend Kwame, who had texted 3 times asking if she wanted to split a pizza and watch something. She went to the gala because she had spent 10 years building something in a city that had spent most of that time behaving as though she wasn't in the room. She had been passed over for partnerships at firms that later called her when they needed her connections. She had been asked more than once whether she was the assistant. She had been handed coats she had not asked anyone to take. She had been smiled at in the particular way that means the person smiling has already decided they do not need to remember your name. She had not gone to the gala for revenge. She was 30 years old and she had learned at some cost that revenge was an expensive thing to want. She had gone to see if anything had changed. She had her answer. 3 weeks after the announcement, Zara was back in the Grand Royale. Different room this time. The executive boardroom on the 7th floor, which had a view of the lake and walls lined with photographs of the building at various stages of its history. The earliest photo was from 1889, and it showed a narrow stone building on a muddy street with a hand-painted sign above the door. The boardroom was full. Harlan sat at the head of the table. Brendan sat to his left. There were lawyers and accountants and 2 people from Zara's firm. There was a notary. There were glasses of water. Zara sat across from Brendan. He did not look at her directly for the first 20 minutes of the meeting. When he finally did, briefly, across a table full of papers, she held his gaze for exactly as long as was necessary and then looked back at the document in front of her. She had things to review. The chandelier in the lobby downstairs caught the late afternoon light every day at 4 o'clock. Zara had learned this over the course of the due diligence process, during the months when she'd had reason to be in the building often enough to notice the patterns of it, the way the light moved, the way the room changed depending on who was in it, the way a space holds memory whether or not anyone is paying attention. It was a beautiful chandelier. She had thought so the first time she saw it, and she thought so now. She had no particular plans for it. Some things are beautiful and functional exactly as they are, and the right decision is simply to protect them. She signed the final page of the agreement at 4:17 p.m., while the light from the chandelier was still finding its way up through the floors, reaching, as light does, into every room whether it's been invited or not. I've thought about that cracked phone on the marble floor more times than I can count. Not because it was dramatic, it was, but that's not why it stays with me. It stays with me because of what Zara did next, which was nothing. She gathered her things, she held her card, and she walked out into the November cold without a single word that needed to be said. There's something I've come to believe, not from any book or teaching, but from watching how things actually unfold over time. The way you treat people when you think it doesn't matter is exactly when it matters most. Camille didn't lower her voice because she was certain Zara was nobody. Brendan didn't stop walking because he was certain the dropped card meant nothing. They were operating on assumption, the comfortable, unexamined kind. An assumption is almost always the thing that undoes people in the end. Not fate, not luck, just the gap between what you presume to be true and what is actually true. Zara didn't win because of some sudden reversal of fortune. She won because of 10 years of work that nobody in that ballroom had bothered to see. That's the part that I keep coming back to. The work was already done. The papers were already signed. She went to that gala with nothing to prove and everything already settled, and they still managed to treat her like an inconvenience, which tells you something important, not about Zara, but about the room. What strikes me about her is that she wasn't performing patience. She wasn't gritting her teeth and enduring. She had genuinely moved past the need for their approval, and that's a different thing entirely. It takes a specific kind of integrity to keep building something with care when the people around you have decided you don't belong in the conversation. It takes a kind of honesty with yourself about what you're doing and why, about what you want the work to actually mean that most people find uncomfortable to maintain. It's easier to want the recognition first and do the work second. Zara seemed to have understood, somewhere along the way, that it didn't work like that. And then there's the persistence of it. A decade. Not a good year followed by a windfall. 10 years of moving through rooms that handed her other people's coats, of being asked if she was the assistant, of being smiled at by people who had already decided not to remember her name. She kept going anyway, not loudly, not with any particular announcement, just steadily, the way water moves. And eventually, water gets everywhere. I don't think Zara went to that gala for revenge. I think she went because she needed to know if anything had changed, and she got her answer. And she walked out and let the morning handle the rest. The morning did. That single pearl left on the desk, the chandelier catching light at 4017 on a Tuesday, the papers signed. These are not dramatic images, they're quiet ones. And I think that's the point, that the most significant things often look like nothing from the outside, until suddenly they look like everything.